and they refused to go down. Believe it was the second time that Kansas has lost at home after leading at half in the last 82 games, and I think that kind of sums it up well. How about that win last night for Houston Cougars basketball and Kelvin Sampson?
I mean, unreal, right? I mean, the threes in overtime, after the missed free throws, after the turnovers, like you couldn't script it. I mean, it was a dream scenario, but I did feel like their effort just sort of epitomized everything that this Houston program has been under Kelvin Sampson, right? Like it is a true never say die attitude. Those guys play unbelievably hard, whistle the whistle. Maybe the hardest playing team consistently in college basketball. And when you do things like that, the college basketball gods reward you over and over again. Like if you are the hardest playing team, you will find ways to win that, people would not believe. And I still don't know that I believe what happened last night, but an absolutely huge win that changes the landscape of the Big 12 title race. You win at the Fog, it opens things up. They're still the only undefeated team in the league. Knocks Kansas down a peg pretty significantly. But I just thought their belief and their resolve in some of those key moments on the road, one of the toughest environments of college basketball, was incredibly, incredibly impressive. And for them to find a way to a remarkable win, I mean, that was as good a win as anyone will get all season, I think, in college basketball.
Tyler, you said you had to get on your feet for that one. Just watching.
I don't lead the lazy boy much. I stood up and started yelling. I wasn't even watching the game with anybody. When Uzan hit that three, I think to send it into overtime. Yeah, I lost it. I couldn't believe they're going into overtime. And let's just talk about it. I think Bill Self is one of the best coaches at after timeout plays to get a bucket, and they turned the ball over. I was super shocked there. But while watching the game, the one thing that really stood out to me was I really felt like Jawan Roberts got the best of Hunter Dickinson, especially late in the game. They kept putting him on that ISO right on that left elbow and just clearing out and letting him take one or two dribbles, getting past Dickinson, going up with that left-hand hook right at the rim. And in my mind, I'm like, are you not going to cut off his left? Make him shoot it with his right. And he played unbelievable. And I will say this was one of my favorite games I've ever watched in college. And the reason I say that is because how hard Houston played. Sweeney just talked about it. I have not seen a team play that hard this year. They were doing everything they could to win. They're turning them over. They're pressing. They're getting rebounds when they needed to, executing when they needed to execute. And it was just satisfying to see because sometimes, especially in the NIL, we get a little upset because kids are getting all this money and we're not seeing the effort or the level of play sometimes as viewers that we want. Houston brought it, and you don't just walk into Lawrence and win it. And I've always said Calvin Sampson's he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He didn't get it, in the Coach of the Year. I didn't think he got considered in a lot of the Coach of the Year talk past few years, but I think he's done an unbelievable job, and he definitely deserves his credit and a little recognition this year for what he's doing for the Big 12.
Yeah, I thought it was a great battle between Roberts and Dickinson specifically. I mean, you're right. Like Roberts scored the points there at the end, but I got to give Dickinson credit because I mean they were just doubling him all day, and he was surgical, man. I mean, he was really slicing them up. He wasn't really able to score, but I mean the way that Kansas was winning that game was a lot of double team kickouts to Rylan Griffin, who was knocking him down. So I thought Dickinson did as well as he could have done given the circumstances, but there's no question that Roberts got the best of him there at the end with the scoring. Sweeney, there was a discussion, and you talked about it, about how physical and how hard Houston plays, and obviously it's how they win. It's an attribute, it's a trait. Is this a fair statement or not, that the physicality and the toughness and just the reckless abandon that they play with in the regular season catches up with them in March? Is that fair or unfair?
I don't think it's so much that their physicality catches up to them, they wear down. I think it's more so that, when you wind up in a close game, Houston just doesn't run a ton offensively. Like they're not out scheming you on the offensive end. they trust their guys to go get shots and hunt matchups, right? So yesterday they won a lot of those matchups with Roberts when they needed to down the stretch. And I do think having a guy that they can really score around the rim helps them and change their team, because they haven't really had that the last couple of years. It's been so guard oriented. But I think they do kind of settle into iso ball a lot, and that does make it hard in big March possessions when the whistle tightens up and you don't get calls, you don't get to the free throw line as much. Like, I think that's been a challenge for them. Now, I think the thing that could be different this year is, again, the post scoring and then the shooting. I mean, this is one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the country, top 10, almost 40% from deep this season. So if they can make shots from beyond the arc, they can post score it a little bit, and then their point guard play with Uzan continues to emerge, right? 17 points, 9 rebounds, 9 assists, 0 turnovers. That was a huge step for him. And if he is playing at a high level, I think it changes their team in March.
Yeah, there's no question about that. On the Kansas front, Tyler, obviously, like, they're not going anywhere. And I thought Badunga's emergence yesterday, he fouls out, and that was obviously a huge loss for them. But it still feels like, even with that loss, their arrow might be pointing up. Like, especially we take that and Rylan Griffin making some big time shots.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point. Badunga, I mean, if he can come on, I really think that when they're missing Adams, I think his ceiling is higher, and I think his athleticism and the more experience he gets, he's going to get more comfortable, confident, and he also provides a lot of rim protection. I mean, he is a above the rim player. But I will say this about Kansas: the one area that I am a little bit concerned is, I do feel like AJ Storr can be, provide a little more productivity than he did against Houston. I know he had a bad game, but you've got to get something from him. And you've got, Rylan Griffin came on. If you get him coming off the bench like that, it's just going to add depth to your team. And, listen, I've talked about Bill Self a lot. I really like him. I think he's one of the best in-game adjusting coaches in college basketball. I think he's a great X and O guy. And you're right, Dickinson, he uses him well. Self has always used the bigs well. And I do think that, Dickinson being a fifth-year guy, I put a lot of value in players like him. Yeah, I mean, Kansas is not out of it. This isn't a knock on Kansas. This is more about me just being stunned that Houston was able to go into Allen Fieldhouse and win the way they did, especially come down, from what they did to win that game. It was just unbelievable.